All right, welcome everybody to tonight's show. Tonight we're going to be talking about incident command and aggressive command, and some of our experiences, dealing with different command practices. One of the things that we get to do at Combat Ready Fire Training is, a lot of us have been kind of traveling around on the circuit for a number of years. I've been traveling around teaching for about the past 20 years or so. And one of the things that I never really realized it when I started, was that it adds to your experiences is you really get outside of your box. You get to talk to different people. You get to see how different fire departments do things. And you really learn that, how different things can be different places. So one of the things we do a lot of, obviously, as many of you probably know, is travel around and do a lot of command classes and strategy and tactics classes. And there's a lot of questions and discussions that kind of repeatedly come up in those conversations. And that's some of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight, right? So we're going to kind of get into talking about some hot topic issues with the command post, and where should the command post be? Should it be at a vehicle? Should it be outside the vehicle? What are the pros and cons of each? We'll kind of talk a little bit about the setup of the vehicle. We'll talk about, maybe how to make some fireground assignments, or kind of how we're doing that on our firegrounds, and talk about kind of how we're organizing the incident and tracking companies. So a couple quick things before we jump into it, especially if you like what you're seeing here. We have a webinar planned for January 23rd that is going to be an updated webinar talking about dividing and organizing the incident, and how to use a tactical worksheet or command board to track the incident. And we're going to be doing that on the 23rd of January. And I'm going to be using some real incidents to kind of put up a fire and talk through this scenario, and really talk about how we would organize it and place companies and track those companies on the fireground. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you're a member of the Bay Floor, thebayfloor.com, if you're not already tuned into that. But that's where that'll be hosted. It's going to be really cool, and looking forward to it. So moving on with tonight, joining me tonight, I have two of our other instructors and two of my good friends, Frank Malta from Frederick County, Maryland, and Floyd Wise from the Harrisburg Bureau of Fire in central Pennsylvania there. So what's up, man? How's everybody doing tonight? Floyd, what's going on up there in Harrisburg?
Well, it's funny, before we started here, Nick, I'm trying to stay warm. I didn't realize I expected North Carolina to be a balmy 60. It's just about 20 here. So, light snow dusting earlier this week. So just trying to stay warm.
I hear you. I got 9 degrees on you, but like I was telling you before the show, my kid hasn't been to school more than one day this week, because they close school when it's cold down here. It hasn't even snowed yet. It's supposed to snow tomorrow, but that's how we roll. Frank, what's up in
Uh,
Frederick?
Same deal, man. North Pole cold, and busy getting ready to ramp up for two more academy classes to start on Monday.
I I got to hang out with Frank, a week or two ago. I was up there for some family stuff, and we were talking about that. And it reminded me of I had forgotten about the persistent 20-mile-an-hour wind that just comes out of nowhere, that exists in the Maryland area from like October to like May. So, was glad to see that again, or not really. But anyway, you guys know as well as I do, we travel on the road a lot. We talk to a lot of people. Our fire departments run things similarly and differently. Floyd is a little bit different, or a lot different, I think, than you and I, Frank. Our department operations are pretty quick, are pretty close. But Floyd, I mean, you're in, especially for people on the East Coast, a pretty iconic fire department, a department that has a pretty strong social media presence. Definitely goes to a lot of fire. Harrisburg, capital Pennsylvania. For those that are on the show that aren't really familiar with Harrisburg, can you kind of give them a rundown of like the department, what the area looks like, and kind of like the average fires that you go to?
yeah, I mean, so our department, obviously, like many, is very urbanized, right? Small city. We're probably talking 6.5 square miles of, populated area, densely populated, population of maybe, say, roughly 50,000. It goes well over that during the day. We have a lot of transient population that comes into the city. And, with our social media presence, a lot of people really see that we do see a lot of fire activity in our city. So, with that being said, a lot of credit to The staff that we have on the floor, they're very aggressive firemen. They do a fantastic job with providing that service very quickly, turning out quickly. We're a very training oriented fire department, I believe. I'd like, hopefully, maybe I'm leading some of that. I'd like to hope, but I think we're not too unique when we look at incident command. When you look at that northeast corridor, where typically a lot of the command presence is kind of in front of the building, not necessarily tied to a vehicle, in the street command, I guess you could call it. And so that is very traditional for us. And I think that for the generations in my city that have done that, they probably have done it very effectively, right? They've learned to work in that. The difference that I stand on is that I've lived that experience, right? And the challenges that come with it. And then, as we're going to discuss this evening, I've really looked at and sort of experienced other options with command officer locations, and I've experienced the change that comes with that as a positive. And we're going to obviously dissect all that here working through this evening. So I think I've had the benefit of commanding tough fires from the street, and I've felt those limitations. And then I've had the opportunity with our company, with Combat Ready, to go out and speak about what it could be like to put that command officer in a different environment, and then see the outcome of that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of an interesting thing because, I mean, no doubt. I mean, Harrisburg is a nitty gritty, what's the right politically correct word kind of
Salt,
city.
a lot of salt, a lot of
You
salt.
know, I mean, but if you hear what I'm saying, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's that kind
These
of
guys,
city,
these
man. I
guys
mean, you
work.
guys
They
get
work for a
after
living.
it.
There's no doubt they work for a living.
Yeah, old row homes, no shortage of work. I mean, kind of place you probably don't want to buy a house, but you definitely want to work. And
Yeah.
I mean, Floyd, I remember I met you. I mean, we had known each other, I think, off and on through friends of friends. But I mean, I kind of met you pretty early. I mean, kind of think of right as you were making that transition from captain to battalion, and you made deputy. You're one of the deputy chiefs now. And what's that?
Right.
A year or two you've been doing that?
Actually, believe it or not, it's going on 2.5 years that I've been a deputy chief now.
But prior to that, you were the senior battalion chief, right? 10 years as a battalion,
Correct. I had 12 years as a battalion chief total.
12 years.
So, yeah. So managing those incidents, right? Across the city, all different types of incidents, right? Special operations, fires, all of those challenging things. And then doing that with two things really challenging. Number one, limited staffing, right? Like many city fire departments, limited staffing. And then number two, limited supervisory fire officers, right, to break that incident up. And that's what really challenges. It adds to the kind of the chaos of managing it when you're on the street level.
Yeah, and so Frank, kind of, how does what you're dealing with in Frederick kind of contrast to Floyd's area?
So I'd say a couple things that are different in Frederick County, Maryland. um, is we're a combination system for one. Roughly 630 career members, 400 operational volunteers. We geographically we are different. The city of Harrisburg is densely populated in a small area, whereas Frederick City is fairly densely populated, but the county itself is gigantic. It's the largest county in the state of Maryland at like 660 some square miles. So the geography challenges certain things when it comes to the responses and just battalion coverage and stuff like that, and essentially is bisected by a mountain, which complicates things a little bit as well. Um, um, I guess those are probably the biggest things that would contrast us versus Harrisburg. And the area, in addition to like the size and everything, the area goes from very very urban to very very rural fairly quickly, right? So you operate sometimes almost like two completely different fire departments, based on wherever the box alarm is.
Yeah, and I mean, so the math, if I'm doing the math right, you guys have 3 on-duty battalion chiefs, right?
Yep.
And 600 some square miles. So like each battalion chief is covering, I'm sure it's not
Right.
equal, it's completely equal, but 200-ish square miles plus or minus
Yep.
each, right? That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
for sure.
And you run two chiefs on the box, so if you're second too, right? I mean, you could be going the distance, I guess.
Just stop and
So
get gas on the way.
that's right.
That's probably an
Uh,
interesting point, Frank. Like your incident command time, like for you as a battalion chief in Frederick, you could be working without a command officer for a significant period of time, versus in my department, we're arriving with companies in 3 minutes, right? Like there's really no lapse in operating time.
yeah. So, well, one of the things that comes up a lot, I mean, I think it's one of the biggest things I wanted to talk about tonight because I didn't know this when we met, Floyd. I mean, I kind of knew a little bit about how Harrisburg does things, and then I knew how we did things, and I knew they were different, but one of the biggest differences I think between our departments is, as you kind of alluded to earlier, is where command is run from, right? Uh, Frank and I are running command from inside of the vehicle, inside of Tahoes or pickup trucks, and you're running command from outside in the street, out in the yard, right? And two things about that, right? One thing I think I said to you at our last class together, the one thing you definitely got on us is your Fireground pictures look a lot cooler than ours. Right, because Floyd's always out there. He's got 2 feet of snow, like in this rundown Pennsylvania city with boarded up row homes behind him. Right, he's got a 3-day beard, a dirty leather helmet, his coat hanging off, a clipboard in his hand out front of the fire building. It's hard to top that with a picture of me sitting in a Tahoe writing on a clipboard. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying real hard, but I can't get the cool factor on there. But real talk. The most interesting thing, I think, when you and I mean, I guess I didn't really know until you started talking about it in classes next to me, was that despite the fact you've been doing that for a long time, it doesn't really seem to be your favored way of running the incident. I mean, do you want to kind of talk about that, or?
Yeah, not at all. So obviously, throughout my experience, right, and the real talk is, and a lot of people don't want to admit this, is having that incident commander in front of the building is a very ineffective location, and a lot of people don't really want to admit that. But the problem is, and I've experienced it again. This is real life experience. When you put yourself out front in those first few moments of an incident, when it's extremely chaotic, there's a lot going on. You're trying to make sense out of the problem that's at hand. You're trying to measure what resources you think you need, or where those resources are going to go. At that same moment, especially in my environment where the companies are arriving, they're deploying, right? Because we have a somewhat defined structural fire policy, so they're deploying to where they believe they need to be, and in the midst of that really critical moment, and that's the thing I'd like to stress, is that's the critical moment when you're establishing where this incident is about to go to, right? Are we going to get control, or is it going to be a growing incident? Then you're wrought with interruptions, right? I mean, everybody and their neighbor sees, the friendly neighborhood battalion chief and his white helmet and his coat, and they want to tell you everything that they believe is important to you at that moment, right? Because they have information. As well as the police department wants to give you information, EMS wants to give you information, and all of this doesn't even take into account establishing some type of command post or something. So it is probably, like, from my reflection, it on numerous occasions, many occasions, it has made it very, very hard for me to kind of get a grasp of my incident action plan, like what I would like to do. And sometimes it was there was a lot of voids that wasn't able to fill in immediately, just because of interruptions. So just from the onset of arriving, right, when you have the most chaos, you're placing yourself in that chaotic environment, trying to make really super critical decisions that you could have to pay for later. And that's my argument, right? And the other side of it is, and I'm sure we're going to talk more, Nick, I know you're going to jump on this, is there's an argument, and we hear it all the time, right? I have to be in front of the building. I have to see it. I have to feel it. I have to be with the men. I have to understand what they're doing. And I would ask the question, is that true? Is that valid? And so many will say that I have to see the problems. Well, there's two things I'd like to argue with that. Number one, why do you individually have to see the problem? What genius opinion do you have that no one else has been trained to figure out these unique Fireground problems that you have to see this problem? And then I think with that as a training issue, like are our staff not able to communicate clearly to us what's going on? Is there a communication gap? So I think there's a number of other issues that are tied to the incident commander being in front of the building, and then we use that um, machismo, right, to argue the need for that, right? And I think it looks good, like you said, looks good for pictures, but it's not effective for really managing the fireground.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and to be clear, when you say, I think we would all agree on here that, when you say in front of the building, we do want the incident commander to be able to see the building, right?
Absolutely.
Regardless of where you're running command from, I do think it's important that you're able to see the problem. And I think what you're kind of talking to there is when you say being outside, kind of roaming around the front of the building or roaming around
Yeah,
the street or that
when
kind of
I'm
thing.
saying in front of the building, what I'm indicating, what I'm really leaning towards are those common temptations of I'm right in front of the building. I'm going to help with this fireground task. I'm going to go in this building just for a second to take a look up the stairwell. I'm going to bounce out. I'm going to run down the side of the building to the rear to see if the ladders are being thrown. I'm going to come back out front, roaming and moving. And we can go back and talk about the fireground failures that have been tied to mobile command posts or somebody moving around.
Yeah, I guess the big question in though, and Frank, I'll tag you in on this too. I mean, the big question is if there are so many problems with that, why do people do it? And if there are so many problems, I mean, many people would tell you they do it every day and it's successful. So if there's so many problems with it, how are people successful for it, or what does that success mean? What I mean, Floyd, you do it, right? I mean, I've commanded fires outside of the vehicle a couple times, and it was terrible, and that's why I don't do it anymore. But you do it. I mean, you've been doing it for 14 years, as a
Hey,
chief or something. So
Frank, Nick, can I propose a kind of an argument to that, and I'll let you guys respond. Okay, so I'm going to play the part of this person that believes in the outside command. So let me throw this out. For 12 years, I commanded fires in Harrisburg from the sidewalk, right? In those 12 years, I didn't suffer really any maydays or catastrophic fireground failures. Now, not to say I didn't have some fires that didn't go quite the way I wanted, but I didn't suffer any line of duty deaths or tragic losses. So, can't we use that as a measurement that my system worked?
well, I mean, I was kind of, I don't know, this is gonna be a dumb or genius, but it's like riding a motorcycle without a helmet on. Like 100%, you look cooler than the guy in the Gumby suit. You know what I'm saying? But if you're riding a motorcycle without a helmet on, it's gonna be fun for a while, but when that bad day happens, it's gonna be real bad. And I think maybe it's a similar kind of thing. I think there's a lot of ineffective things you could do on a fire, not just beyond command. I mean, there's a lot of things you can get away with for a long time, but everybody pays the piper one day. you know I don't
Well, I
know,
mean, how
Frank,
many
what do you
agencies
got any
out there now have
observations on
some of
this?
that?
Yeah, so obviously, like I'm a pro in the vehicle guy, as stated, and I think there's a lot of benefits. One of the ones that stood out that Floyd kind of alluded to was minimizing your distractions. So if I'm in the vehicle and I have the windows rolled up, and not only can I hear, right, I don't hear outriggers dropping, I don't hear the wagon throttling up, the chainsaw going to work. I can concentrate. But I also don't have everybody and their cousin coming up to me trying to tell me what they think is the most important thing about this incident, right? And that's both internally and externally. You have the neighbor that wants to tell you, they went on vacation last week, so their luggage might not be unpacked, like that has any bearing on the fire. And then you even have your own people sometimes want to come up. Hey man, did you hear what happened at 49? Or hey, did you see the game yesterday? And like things that have no bearing on the incident and just detract from your attention. So I think that's probably one of the bigger things that Floyd touched on, where he sometimes has a hard time getting started with his incident because people are constantly interrupting him. When you're sitting in a vehicle, you can minimize that, right? If you want to talk to him, put the window down. If you don't, don't put the window down. And so that's one of the probably the biggest takeaways there is just the peace and quiet and the ability to concentrate, and you can minimize your distractions.
I think one of the things, and talking to other people, as we've done classes around the country and everything, makes you realize what people think and why they think it. One of the things that I realized that I didn't really think about before is, number one, there are a lot of people out there that are commanding incidents that truly don't have any idea where any of their companies are. They have no clue where their companies are and what they're doing. And some of those people know that and they're okay with it. And some people haven't even thought about it. But they just, if you were to hit pause button in the middle and say, where's engine 1, where's rescue 2, where's ladder 5, they wouldn't have a plumb clue. And that's scary, especially if you're the people that are on those companies. And beyond the accountability issue, it certainly doesn't lend itself to, aggressive tactics and covering tactical positions and putting the fire out and all that kind of thing. And the other thing I didn't really realize as much is there are a lot of people out there, they are alone in command. There is nobody else. They got one guy coming. Nobody else is coming to help him, right? I mean, I've been on fires. I've been in command alone, but the most of the time for my duration of being a chief, I have a second dude chief coming, a lot of times a third dude chief, sometimes fourth or more. And, Frank, I know it's the same for you kind of, and Frederick, and even Floyd. I think, you guys are getting some off-duty chiefs and stuff like that. But I say that to say is a lot of what, we rely on when we talk about commanding from the vehicle is I rely on reports from forward positions, right? I talked about it in some posts on social media this week. First dude chief is, for us in command at the car. Second dude chief is putting on gear in an air pack and taking a forward position. And that is, I understand why people feel limited when they're commanding from the vehicle. You got, what are you seeing? Two sides of the building at best. I get it. Right. But what we are leaning on in that to cover that void is I'm counting on my second dude chief to go forward and see other things I can't see, and to have that, smell it, see it, talk to the guy kind of interaction. And, I balance the benefits of my isolation in the command post. My weakness of that is that I'm only in one place. Well, the benefits of the guy that's in a forward position is that he's able to move around, as Frank would say, he's free to move about the country, right? Southwest style or whatever it is. But, the weakness of the second dude chief is that they're able to be bombarded by those distractions. And I think what's interesting when you look at that model is that whether you're first due or second due, your strengths cover the other guy's weaknesses. And so, that's when I talk about, looking at the differences between strategic level and tactical level command. And I guess a summary of that would be is the strategic level guy is the guy that's at the command post, or in our case in the car, and the tactical level person is that person in full gear in an air pack that's moving, forward towards the fire. Is that it's not an either or it's a both. You need both of those things, to make an effective and safe fire ground. But that's just been some of my observations and talking to people around the country is that, some of them, a lot of what we're talking about ties to being able to track the incident and make assignments and cover the tactical positions and do that without getting distracted about, somebody who wants to know where their cat is. But a lot of people don't really know where anybody is. They're not tracking companies like we would be familiar with. And they're 100% alone. They don't have anybody else to cover those positions.
Well, Nick, I think you hit a solid point there. You hit a solid point there. So putting a command level officer in a car, right? Just that is only a small part of the bigger picture, right? If you're a department much like mine that maybe doesn't have the company level supervision, maybe doesn't have that real disciplined communication worked out, right? Some of those little nuances. If you don't have that determined, then putting somebody in the car actually really disconnects the incident commander from what's going on, right? You need to have those division officers, that polished communication, those predetermined assignments. So, like much of what we talk about with combat ready, we talk about command. It's a much bigger picture than just putting a person in a car, right? So, some agency out there tonight, right? Some chief's going to be like, "Oh, I got it all figured out. I'm just going to sit in my car." That's not going to work at all unless there's other pieces of the machine worked out.
I would 100%. It's called a system for a reason, right?
Yep.
You can have a motor and a steering wheel and some seats, but if you don't have tires, it's not going to go down the
Right.
road,
Not a
right?
car.
If you take away pieces of the system, the car doesn't work anymore. And I, what I mean by that is there's a lot of stuff that has to go into it in terms of, what reports are being given, who's giving them, using those other chief officers in forward positions. If you don't have other chief officers, using company officers in those positions. I mean, that's what we talk about for hours and hours, in the aggressive command program. It's not just as simple as, all right, guys, get in the car and thanks for coming. We'll see you out there. Like, that's not, you're right. That alone is not going to do it. There's a lot of pieces that go along with that. But I mean, I guess probably the $1 million question a lot of people would ask you, Floyd, is if you don't like it and you're the deputy chief of training, and why have you been doing it for 14 years?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I don't know if anybody on the podcast here knows it, but fire departments sometimes are hard nuts to crack for culture. I would say I am probably unpopular for how I view how a command officer should be positioned. And I'm okay with that because, again, I've had experience on both sides. I've seen the benefits. A lot of people, I think, out there that are these hardcore, street level commanders, if they would, maybe go through a simulation or something and try it differently, they would reflect and say, wow, that was actually a little bit easier. That's kind of what happened for me. But unfortunately, at that executive level in a fire department, right? It takes somebody at the very, very top that believes in it. It takes strong policy. It has to be a lot of buy-in. I think for a lot of the Northeast corridor fire departments, it goes back to, well, we've been doing it this way for, I don't know, much longer than I've been around the fire service, and it's worked well for us. So it's a little bit of an unpopular position to be in. I'll say that, Nick.
I mean, I hear, I hear you. I mean, I think that's a misconception some people have, is just because you're, and I'd say this about myself too, just because you're one of the chiefs doesn't mean you can change everything. We do have other
It,
chiefs that we work
it's
with.
complex, right? Especially in a
Yeah.
system like ours, right? I've got a lot of training involved. That's policy development. It's just not simple.
Yeah. And, I think the command post thing, it's important. It's one of my top 5 for people that have seen out at FDIC when I talk about the top 5 commandments, of safe and effective firegrounds. The command post is definitely a thing. But I mean, I say it in the class, like all the time, like, the main thing is that you're distraction free, that you're able to track where your companies are, and that you have the resources, widgets, radios, or whatever that you need to effectively run the incident. And I mean, if you can do all of that, I don't really care where you are. I have just found in my experience that there hasn't been a place much more effective than the command vehicle. But it's really not about the vehicle itself. It's about achieving the benefits that the vehicle gives you. And if you can
Right.
achieve those benefits another way, then I think that door is open, right? Frank, do you have something on that?
I did, yeah. So, talking about the benefits of the vehicle, in addition to what we already talked about, you got the stronger signal strength of the mobile radio versus a portable radio. In some instances, depending how you spec your buggies, you have the luxury of multiple mobile radios. So if you're breaking things down where you have a staging or rehab or water supply, if you're in a rural environment, you have the ability to work off of multiple radios in what we'll call the command platform. You have the MDT. If that's something that your department uses, that can, you can kind of use that to bounce, the units that you have operating there or responding to the incident. Just having all those resources at your fingertips, you're not going to have that in the front yard.
Yeah. 100%. And I see some of the comments there, and I think one of them was kind of alluding to, there are some departments that they might not have a dedicated command vehicle. I mean, there's a lot of volunteer fire departments out there where they don't have what you guys, what you and I would all refer to as our buggies, our chief's cars with $100,000 of magical widgets in it, purpose built for doing this. So can we, how do you address that? If you're a volunteer chief and you're going to the fire in your pickup truck or whatever, I mean, how do you address this issue?
Yeah. So probably the first one that jumps out to me, the same way if you do pull up in one of those fancy vehicles and you're boxed out, right? You might have to relocate yourself to like the front seat of a fire engine, right? I guarantee you that has a radio. It likely has doors that you can shut. Has a gigantic windshield to look out of. So and then instead of, you may not have multiple mobile radios, but you have the ability to use more than one portable radio within the vehicle. Again, a climate controlled environment, a sterile environment, so that you can concentrate and maintain accountability of the people that are operating on the scene. Because in addition to hoping this fire goes out, that is your main responsibility, is making sure that your people are safe and you're tracking their movements 100% of the time.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, moving on from that, a little bit, we talk about what you're kind of talking about. I mean, so we need to have stuff, right? So there needs to be, when you talk about your command post and like what you want to have at it, in terms of, you mentioned radios, command boards, widgets, whatever, Floyd, what do you want to have available to you when you're the incident commander, and how do you achieve that?
All right. So for me, this is actually kind of segues into I guess my cheat that I came up with. When I transitioned to that role of being, a citywide commander and understanding I was going to be in charge, and then understanding that accountability of our staff is the one thing we have to achieve. If you're in command, and I don't care how small the fire or how small the incident, and you don't have accountability, then you are automatically failing your job role. And I'll stand on that all day. So for me, being out of the vehicle, obviously, I understood that a tactical worksheet was what I needed to use to note how I was going to break the incident up, and then where people were going to work. So, with some assistance from some peers that I had met at a very optimum time, I developed a worksheet, and then I had that laminated. And to keep it portable, because obviously I wasn't going to work in the vehicle, if you took a look at me over many, many years, I carried a clipboard with my grease pencils and my magic markers in it, or in my pocket. And then I would use that clipboard and make notes on it as I walked around the fireground, or if I positioned myself on the alpha side and threw my clipboard on the roof of a car. And then I would use that, to track my accountability. Was it ideal? No, that would have been much easier to do sitting in a vehicle or in the cab of a fire truck. But at that time, it fixed the one thing that I needed, was the ability to track my companies. Was it ideal? No, but I made it work. And I would say that's the one thing at the command post you got to have, is some form of accountability sheet. And then obviously, for that to work, as stupid as this sounds, you obviously have to have writing instruments, which I know that sounds ridiculous, but like Nick and I joke, that's a chief's level problem.
Yeah. Well, Floyd, I got to send you this picture. I got somebody emailed us a picture today. They had, they were talking about, they had one of our new command boards, and they just run their first fire with it or whatever. And they were in outside of the car department, so it does work outside of the car. Well, they had, I don't know if any of you guys played an instrument when you were young, but like the collapsible stand that you put you put the sheets of music on.
Like your music on?
I'll send it to you, brother. I'll send it to you. So
you can't hate.
We'll get them in stock at the Combat Ready shop for all of our out of the buggy friends. But the command board does fit on a collapsible music stand if you need it to do so. And this, I don't know, this. You gotta tell me here, Floyd. I don't know. Maybe I'm weak. I'm weak-blooded now. I moved out of from Philadelphia. I lost my cold weather genes several years ago when I moved to the South, but we had a fire last night, and I didn't do a whole lot on it. But while I was outside, I got a little splash of the hose line, and it's cold as shit down here right now. It's 20-some degrees, and my hands were still cold 3 hours later. I mean,
Yeah.
like caveman hands, like could barely hold anything. And I'm just wondering, when you talk about tracking incidents, I am familiar that it gets pretty cold up there in Harrisburg in the winter.
Yeah.
How does that weather affect your ability to pay attention to what's going on, or even just simply move a magnet, hold a pen, whatever you're doing to track these companies?
Well, that's the other side of it too. Was when you look at the incident commander and the level of focus that we want them to have, right? We want them thinking. We want them fully focused on the ideal age and where people are moving, reading smoke, reading the building, reading fire. And at that moment, I don't think that person needs to be hypothermic or on a really hot day, really having heat stress. I've been there, and it does not help you to remain focused and in charge, right? And I've I've been out on winter fire scenes with soaking wet feet in sub-zero weather. I can tell you that for that 2 hour period, I did not want to be in command. I wanted to be back in a firehouse with warm socks. So that's all avoidable distractions when you just look at the environment, and especially for the key person that's responsible for organizing the fireground, right? And I think that we really got to segregate the job role of that person that's in charge from the job role of everyone else, and we've got to be able to separate those things. And I've lived in those environmental extremes, and it's not fun.
Yeah, 100%. So, well, let's kind of move on from the command post a little bit and kind of talk about initial fireground assignments, because that's one of the things I think when I'm in command of an incident. um, you know, I'm kind of trying to. When I pull up and I take command, my order of thinking, the first thing I'm looking at is my size up information, and obviously getting an idea about what the building is, what our situation is, what kind of conditions we have, all that kind of thing. And the next thing that's going to lead me to is, okay, if this is what I have in front of me, what do we need to do about it, right? What assignments do we need to make? What positions do we need to cover? What are going to be the priorities, right? And so one of the things I think the incident commander needs to be very focused on in the beginning is being able to make sure that those initial fireground assignments are covered, right? So, Frank, you kind of want to talk a little bit about how that goes in Frederick. I mean, I know you're kind of running two very different operational areas there. You kind of have the city environment, you have a rural environment. How are those initial assignments getting made or covered, and does that change from the city to the county for you guys, or?
So on paper, no, it really doesn't. So when you're in the rural environment, the one component or additional variable is the water supply, right? So like our rural assignments have an additional engine company that's responsible for going and setting up a fill site wherever it was identified. So that's where they're different. But as far as the fire ground itself, you might have a longer lay to the objective, but ultimately at the structure that is on fire, the tactical positions are the same, right? So, and we talk about it when we're on the road, 6 tactical positions that you need to cover. And you got to have the resources to be able to plug into those positions, right? So then in a rural setting where you may be dealing with units coming understaffed or failing to respond at all, then that's when it starts getting a little challenging, and you have to kind of plug and play and figure out what the priorities are, and in the worst case scenario, which ones you're going to do without.
Yeah, and I operate in a pretty similar area to you, Frank, kind of, as you know, where I kind of have my city environment where everybody gets there right now, and then I have my county environment where you get, maybe small waves of like one or two companies at a time, and it might be 5-10 minutes before the next wave of people gets there. And I think all of us on here operate in departments, that are principally engine and truck oriented. Our engines do engine work, and our trucks, ladder companies, do ladder company work. And in our city environment, there's not a blur in between that very much. Pretty much they stick to that. Because one of the things I've always kind of said about tactics is there's a lot of things that need to be done on a fire ground But whenever the possibility presents itself, whenever the possible answer is to just do everything right now, well, that's the right answer. If you can do everything right now, we don't need to talk about prioritization because it's all being done right now. But I think where that becomes a big challenge, I know it does for me, and I'm sure it does for you a little bit, Frank. When you're out in those, when you're out with those more delayed arrival times, when you can't do everything at once, right? Do you ever have a circumstance there where you have to deviate an assignment and have an engine company do a ladder company job like the search or the ventilation or something because the ladder company is far away? Or how do you handle something like that?
Yeah, 100%, right? So like, while most of the time the engine companies do engine company work and the truck companies do truck company work, you got to have the latitude as the incident commander to know, when you got to break from that, right? So that's not necessarily the company's, that's not their decision to make, but as the incident commander, very much one you can make, right? So like our second battalion has two ladder trucks in it. One of them's on the Frederick city line, the other one's on the Pennsylvania state line, right? And then there's probably 20 miles in between the two of them. So when they're out of one's out of service, or you have a fire somewhere in the middle, that special service specifically is going to be delayed, right? If you got a report of people trapped, or even if you don't, you got to get the search underway, right? So that's one of those where you have to deviate, and it's 100% justifiable, right? Even the policies, and I don't want to get too far ahead or go down a rabbit hole or a rant, but the SOPs are kind of like the direction for the companies when they arrive before you. But once you get there as the incident commander and you recognize that there may be the need to deviate, that's absolutely within your realm to do, and you should do it, right? Like nobody's going to jam you up for doing the right thing.
Yeah. Well, so Floyd, you talked about a little bit, in the beginning there. How do the assignments go in Harrisburg? Are Harrisburg's SOP driven assignments, or does the incident commander manually assign the companies, or how does that go?
So the one thing, and it's actually a good thing, our department runs on a structure fire policy. So the first engine, second engine, first truck, second truck have pretty relatively clear assignments on where they need to be and what they should be doing. Right, short of anybody, calling an audible, which obviously is completely allowed as long as they can kind of vocalize what that is. And I would say for the most part, our Firegrounds from the company interaction level generally on most of your normal fires are very smooth, right? And pretty predictable. Pretty predictable in that where that first line, second line, first search, second search ventilation is going to occur. So again, so one of the things that I've really swung towards, I'm a very policy driven person, right? I think that good policy makes or breaks a fire department. Now, there are some areas of our structure fire policy that need some expansion, that have not, changes in the era, maybe priority of search, things like that need to be reinforced. But that's just simple writing and training and editing. But the policy driven mechanism is what has worked for me. And if you think about this, just to kind of like logic this out, if I'm the incident commander, right, in my environment, I arrive on scene and I've got four companies arriving immediately, like right on top of each other, like they're in the street, same time. If that's worked out, I have very little decision making to do with telling them what to do. If it's already worked out, I can look at the building, I can focus on smoke, fire, what my priorities are, where the fire may be moving, exposure control, right? I can make good decisions without having to communicate unit by unit what needs done.
That's one of my biggest things with that is when you talk about departments that don't have any kind of, it's called a million things: predetermined assignments, general orders, SOP, SOG, tactical assignments, MOP. I mean, there's a million different acronyms for having a plan. And one of the things I've kind of reflected on over the years with that is what the presence of the plan really allows the incident commander to do is to think about the next instead of thinking about the now, right? When you pull up on a fire, and you've got no plan, everybody has to be told everything what to do. you're so tied up with making sure that somebody stretches an attack line, somebody gets a water supply, somebody does a search, somebody, does ventilation, if somebody's writ, you're so tied up with making these assignments that you make on every single fire that you can't pay attention to what's unique about the fire that you're at. You're too busy regurgitating what you did at every other fire that you can't focus on what's different about this fire. And that's been my biggest experience with that, is that I operate also in a SOG environment where when we pull up on a fire, I know the guys know what to do. And so I can look at the fire and I can say, all right, there's what I got. And I can think in my head, okay, well, I know what they're going to do based on the policy. And then I can think, well, does that match this? And if the answer is yes, I can just be quiet and I can let it happen. And I can just sit there and say, all right, what's different? What are we doing that we should not be doing? What are we not doing that we should be doing? What do I need to adjust here, if anything? One of the things I've kind of told people when we're on the road teaching is, I think something that's interesting about where I work is, half of our fires are in our city and half of our fires are mutual aid. And what that means is half of our fires are SOG driven and half of our fires are not. 50% of the fires I go to, everybody knows what to do when they get there without me saying very much at all. And half of the fires that I go to, I have to manually tell everybody what to do. And I do that pretty much 50-50. And I would tell you 100%, having to tell everybody what to do every single time is ineffective and it's insanely stressful. And it slows the Fireground down. You're highly apt to miss something and you can't think about the problems that are specific to this particular Fireground. So, for me, when I'm in that environment, when I have to manually think about those assignments, I mean, the top two priorities for me are getting a line in service and getting the search underway. And Frank, I think, alluded to that there. But I think an interesting thing that I've noticed, you hear a lot of people talk about, oh, that wouldn't work here and that wouldn't work there. I'll give you a dirty little secret. Most of the time that I'm in command of an IC driven fire, I just run the SOG. I just have the difference is I just have to tell it to everybody.
In those departments that are so incident commander driven, I would ask the question: what if they have a significant fire, right? Significant number of units, and what if the incident commander doesn't make the scene? Then what? Then do we have, like, I don't know, 10 companies doing action? I mean, yeah, I mean, like I've had numerous incidents when I've been the last one there, right? I'm out of the city, I'm far away. They get there well ahead of me, and these are all well-trained firefighters, well-trained lieutenants and captains. They don't need me to micromanage them. They know exactly what a fire looks like. So I've had a ton of evidence of getting there, and they've done all the right things, and I walk up and go, "Yep, fire's out. Yep, searches are clear. Yep, okay, let's rack some hose."
Yeah.
Good.
Well,
we'll stop the sheets. We got a coffee.
I think one of the things you got to know, whether you're running a plan or whether you're not running a plan, and Frank, tell me, maybe, I don't know if you do this at all, is you kind of got to know who you can tap for something, right? So, like, I always kind of have in my head, we emphasize proactive RIT a lot. And I know I can tap that RIT company for a need. And so particularly, like, examples I'm thinking about is if somebody calls an urgent and they've got a victim and they're bringing them out the window and they need help getting them out the window, my go-to is going to be to call the RIT company and send them to help with that removal, right? If the truck company is delayed, which means I'm not getting that initial ventilation, the rapid intervention company can do most of the truck work as long as they don't get on the roof. They can take a window, they can secure the gas and utilities, they can throw portable ladders, that kind of thing, right? I look at my engine companies, and obviously my first engine company is stretching the line to the lowest floor of fire, but I know, kind of based on our plan, that the third and fourth engine companies are my next two attack lines. And I know that I can kind of move them around if I need to, right? I know that unless I say anything, the third due engine is going to take the second attack line to back up the first due engine, and the fourth due engine is going to go to the floor above. but I already know those guys are bringing attack lines. And if the situation dictates that I need to move somebody because maybe there's an exposure issue, maybe there's an outside in issue, or maybe there's some other kind of thing, I know which companies to move for my attack lines, right? I know on, our alarm assignments, we get an extra heavy rescue company, and that heavy rescue company is the only unit on the alarm that does not have a predetermined assignment. And actually their predetermined assignment is to come to the command post and be ready to take any engine or truck company assignment. And so I kind of know, like, if I have a need, those are the places I can go. I can go to the RIT company for certain things. I can go to in my case, the third or the fourth engine, to get a hose line somewhere. And I can go to that rescue company to get pretty much anything done. And I like to know that in my head, because when a need pops up on the Fireground, the last thing you want to be thinking is, well, who am I going to get to do that, right? You got to have some idea where you're going to pull that from. Do you deal with that at all, Frank, or have any kind of tricks like that, or?
Yeah, now I think we're kind of on the same page, man. Like, so probably one of the benefits in working in like organizations like we work in, and I would vouch to say probably 99% of the people on this podcast this evening is, we're not so rigid on our assignments, right? So for me, you work in a firehouse with an engine and a truck, and you jump back and forth all day between them. You're well versed in a lot of things. Whereas you go to some of these big cities, and I'm not at all trying to take away from what they do, but you have a guy that rides a ladder truck his entire career. He might not be able to tell you what end of the hose sprays water. So that's one luxury we have by having what we'll call utility players that you can kind of plug into different spots. Is they're well versed or jacks of all trades, kind of thing, which kind of takes the edge off a little bit. I think it would probably be taboo in some of these big cities to tell a truck to go stretch a line if you absolutely had to. But in most environments where we run fires in the United States of America, we do have that luxury.
Yeah, you got to be able to do that. And one thing I think is important too is to have the ability to kind of manually assign those companies. I talk about it in the classes a lot. Like when you're giving a company an assignment, you want to be as vague as possible, but as specific as necessary. And what I mean by that is you want to make sure you shouldn't have to micromanage when you're giving an assignment, right? It shouldn't be, command engine 1, I need you to get the blue 150-foot 1.75-inch cross lay off of the driver's side of engine 5. Use the one with the stack tips, not the fog nozzle. Advance it around the Bravo side to the Charlie side. Go in the second door to your left. Make sure to put your air pack on. Like, you hear, like, that's a little much, right? A good company officer should be able to use their training and their experience to determine how to best accomplish a goal, or how to best achieve an assignment, right? But you also don't want to be too vague, right? I've seen and I've heard on incidents, an incident commander will say like something like, ladder 1, get up here and ventilate the building. Well, there's a couple different outcomes we could see from that, right? I could see a hole in the roof. I could see windows taken. I could see a fan at the door. Any of that would be ventilation of the structure. And so I say all that to say is that when you're making an assignment, you want to be as specific as necessary to make sure that the company gets the gist and does what you want them to do. But you don't want to micromanage them any more than is necessary to get the job done, right? If you want truck 1 to come up and vent the roof, you probably ought to tell them, command truck 1, I need you to ventilate the roof. I don't think you need to get on there and tell them which saw to bring or what ladder to use to get up there. But, if you just say vent the structure, you have to be okay with that they are going to ventilate the structure however they see fit. And if that's fine with you, have at it. But if you want a more specific outcome, you need to be a little bit more specific in how you give that direction. Does that make sense? Or Floyd, 14 years as a chief, you got anything to add on that?
No, I think that's important. And you talk about adding that detail. I think when you look at the incident commander on the outside, sometimes it's really critical to add some, I would say, detail of what you're seeing from the outside to the companies on the inside to help them either isolate or determine if there's fire extension, right? So you're adding a little bit of detail, but you're still allowing them to figure out what the problem is. Does that make sense?
Yep. 100%. Frank, you got any kind of thoughts on that?
Now I'm on board with what you guys are saying. I think, like Floyd said, there's certainly things that you can tell your observations from the exterior that might paint a better picture for them, and vice versa, right? Like what they're telling me, and that's especially the latter one. Where you're relying on them to give you quality information. That in itself is something that should probably be worked out on the front end. These are conversations you have long before the box alarm's ever transmitted. Words mean things, right? So when people say something that can be interpreted, 3 or 4 different ways, that's not good. So kind of, as probably as silly as it sounds, having a conversation of what communication we use as direct as possible with not, gratuitous detail and tying up the radio for more important stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's important, right? That command side's important, but equally important is the control side, right? The information flowing up is just as important as the information direction flowing down.
What I think an important thing with that is making sure that you, like Frank just alluded to, that you tell people in advance what you want to hear from them, right?
Yep.
I mean, our engine companies know what I want to hear from an engine company is when you got water on the fire, when you're actively applying water to the seat of the fire, and when that fire is knocked down, right? What I want to hear from the truck companies is the status of the search and the status of extension. And that's the main thing I want to hear from, when I'm talking to those companies. I mean, you talk about what people should be saying on the radio and what they shouldn't be saying on the radio. I was always kind of taught like the only things I should be hearing on the radio are, you're given a structured report like that on scene report or a 360 or interior or roof report, like that structured kind of report. You got your job done, you couldn't get your job done, or a safety issue. That's all I need to hear about, right? I think a lot of times people get frustrated because there's a little bit too much nice to know, instead of need to know radio traffic on the channel. And the problem with that is a lot of times the nice to know blocks out the need to know. But I think if you let all your company, I can tell you from experience, because I've done it with fire departments, is if you tell your people, hey guys, this is what I want to hear from engine companies, and this is what I want to hear from truck companies, that's what you'll hear. That is the information they'll give you without asking. And it makes things pretty smooth and effective. So
Yeah, and to take that one step further, and it might be a good segue into another one of our bullet points, is like your division supervisors, right? Where it's essentially everything you just listed off, but it's one individual giving all of that information.
that is by far, I got to tell you, there's a, that's what that 5 commandments thing is. I was going to say, like, if I could give you like a short list of things that I thought that would provide the biggest impact to your Fireground, that's on the list, right? Is dividing the incident down into manageable chunks, using tactical supervisors, divisions and groups to maintain your span of control, to get eyes on forward positions, to get that feedback from places you can't see, and to corral radio traffic. I mean, unless everybody else's fires are just burning completely different than mine are, I would stand in the town square all day and tell you that using tactical supervisors effectively is about one of the most beneficial things you can do for a good control of an incident. And if you rewind years ago to when I, started doing this whole aggressive command supports aggressive firefighting thing, that was intentional, is because, what I saw on Firegrounds was that weak incident command burned down buildings. When people did not have control of the incident, when the incident commander didn't know what they were doing, when they were getting nervous, when they were getting overrun and stressed out and out of control, what was going to happen was either ineffective firefighting operations that were not going to get our best result, or the incident commander was going to hit the eject button, pull everybody out of the building, and make a parking lot out of something we could have saved. And that's what I saw weak command doing. And what I mean by aggressive command doesn't mean talking on the radio a lot and micromanaging people's jobs. That's not what aggressive command means. What aggressive command means is setting up your incident and setting up your command structure so that the firefighters on the engines and the trucks are in the best possible position to do what they do, to stop the fire where we find it and to save all the savable lives. And the way the incident commander supports that the best is by, properly sizing up the incident, making sure we have enough incidents or enough resources to handle the incident, dividing the incident into tactical areas that are going to allow us to cover those jobs that need to be done, putting the right resources in those tactical areas, and then managing the incident, in a way where they can stay low stress, in control, in their span of control, and manage that incident until we put the fire out and clear the searches and stop the fire where we find it. That's what that all means. And I think that, again, that all started from Frank, you talking about the tactical supervisor, because you want a dirty little secret about command. A good tactical supervisor is the most influential person on the fireground, is the more than the incident commander. And I don't mean that to say that the tactical supervisor overrides or outranks or should operate against the incident commander. But I mean, you guys have seen it. You guys have done it. I show videos in the classes all the time. Like, that tactical supervisor in the forward position is in the best place to see opportunities for action, because the incident commander, whether they're in the car or in the yard, they're too far back. They're too high level, and the company officer is too focused on forcing that door, doing that search, or stretching their line, that tactical supervisor is kind of like the cheese in the grilled cheese sandwich. You touch the top bread and the bottom bread. You can see what the company's doing with the hose line, and you can step back and see a little bit of what the incident commander sees. And my experience in that position is that allows me to see a lot of opportunities for action, things that all right, hey, look, if we get a line over here, if we get hooks there, we can do this, or there's a survivable space we can search, or that kind of thing. Is that kind of the experience you've had with that, Frank, or would you add to that? You got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, so probably to add on to what you're saying as far as the benefits of having those tactical level supervisors is, depending on what your first alarm assignment looks like, the span of control might be shot right from the word go, right? So for us, on an urban box alarm, we get 5 engine companies and 3 special services, ambulance, medic unit. And, if you think back to fire class, with the span of control being 3 to 7, optimally 5, that's out the window right out the gate, right? So when you get to the scene and you start to organize it, utilizing your divisions and groups, you can take that large number of resources and break it down incrementally so that it's more manageable and everybody is within that span of control. So for example, if you put 2 engine companies in a truck, and actually we'll leave the names out of it. Anytime you have more than one resource operating in a geographic area, you should label it and put one of them in charge, right? And that does a lot of stuff for you. Now that person who is the supervisor of that area is controlling those other companies. So now you just have division supervisors reporting to you as opposed to everybody on the fireground. Furthermore, it really cleans the communication component up, because most of the communication that's occurring on that geographic area is going to be face to face, and then the supervisor reports it all back to you. So if he's told, hey, we're getting water on the fire, there's no extension, the primary's complete, he can give that as one transmission, and you don't have 3 different transmissions, which then leaves the radio open for more important stuff. Hey, we got a victim on the 2nd floor. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Whatever the scenario may be, that cleans things up a lot, and it just breaks it down into more manageable chunks, so that you can effectively run the fireground.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Floyd, is that something that has that position traditionally been filled in Harrisburg, or I know you're kind of starting to do that now a little bit, or how are you guys
Yeah,
doing
I would say
with that?
that is not something that's structured. It's not policy driven. It's not and always right, not consistent. When I became historically, the deputies like myself have done a pretty good job with helping to support the accountability side of it at the command post, right? Establishing a formal command post. But when I became deputy chief of training, one of my goals, and I told the battalion chiefs, was that when I come to an incident, my plan for me is I'm going to dress out, right? Give them the expectation. I'm going to dress out with my hand tools. I'm going to report to you, and I'm going to take up a divisional role because, much like you said, Nick, I fully embrace the fact that when you push a supervisory officer into a position, it helps to break the chaos and organize the fireground. So I really felt that, like myself coming as a deputy that's still willing to put on an air pack, go to work inside, that's a real benefit to an incident commander that needs that. And that's why I feel so strongly I'm going to continue to do that. I'm not, even though it's not in policy, I'm going to do it because I understand the value of what that can give to an incident commander at the moment when he needs eyes in a certain place, right? Matter of fact, for me, and this is a personal thing, I don't understand any chief officer out there that's not willing to fill that division role. Like, why do you have turnout gear? Why do you have an air pack in your car? They didn't put that there to decorate your car. You should still be a functional firefighter, right? You should still have that skill and the ability to work in the IDLH. Now, what I'm not saying is, as a division officer, I'm not saying I come in, take control from a company officer, start pushing line down the hallway here, give me the nozzle. That's not what I'm saying. That's exactly opposite of what I'm saying. But it's more to support the incident commander and give them that cheese in the sandwich that we really never experienced before. I'll say this: we have one battalion chief in our department does a pretty fantastic job with separating out incidents and divisioning them out. He fully understands that we've got to break this fireground into organized pieces and then put somebody responsible into each one. And when this individual does that, the firegrounds sound more organized, and that inherently adds to firefighter safety.
Yeah, 100%. And then, I was kind of thinking about a couple classes we've all been at together or whatever. And it's funny. I think, I'm sure you guys can remember a couple classes we've been to before where, the progression of the command class, like the first, you get to talking about the command post first, or not first, but before this stuff. And, you'll get like feedback in certain areas, like this in the car stuff, that's for sissies and losers. A real fire chief's out there with the men, out there in the weather. If they're hot, he's hot. If they're cold, he's cold. He's feeling it. He's talking to them. He's up there with them. And then, so you'll have that conversation in the command post thing. And then like later on, we'll get to this part where I'm like, all right, so when you're the second chief there, I want you to put on your air pack, don your mask, and go to the fire floor and take a knee. And they're like, no, that's not what chiefs do. I don't wear an air pack anymore. And I'm like, wait a minute, brother. I thought we were going to get salty with the boys here. You know what I mean?
You can't have it one way or the other.
And you guys have been there and we've had these conversations. It's kind of funny, right? It's like, you can't have your cake and eat it too, man. Like, right. That's the thing is like, yeah, I might look like a loser when I'm sitting in the car in my pressed white shirt, writing on a clipboard with the air conditioning set perfect, talking on a radio. But on the next fire, I'm gonna have my gear on, my air pack on, and I'm gonna be masking up next to the door, next to the guy with the irons. And I do it all the time. And the other thing about that is I think that each position makes the other position makes you better at the other position, right? Some fires I'm sitting in the car running command. Some fires I'm on a fire floor in an air pack. And when I'm sitting in the car, I remember what it's like to be in the air pack on a fire floor. I did it a week ago. I did it on the last fire. I have that sympathy. I have that understanding. I know what it's like. I know what they're dealing with, all of that. And I'm able to bring that to the command post. And then when I'm on the fire floor, because I ride the company too. I'll ride as the company officer or even in the back. And, when I'm riding on even a company or when I'm the division officer and I'm on the fire floor, I have an appreciation for what command is dealing with. I have appreciation for what they're thinking about. And I have a little bit of insight into what I think they want to know or what I think they'll do or how to make a sales pitch, to them about how to make a move, how to take an aggressive action or take one of those action opportunities. Right. One other thing I wanted to kind of piggyback on something kind of both you and Frank kind of said is I think that's the other strength of assigning these tactical positions is that sorry, I just saw our buddy there plugging Buffed Energy. So if you're looking for some Buffed Energy, hit up my boy Spray 9.
Do you get a kickback from Buffed Energy? Does he get like
completely derailed my chain of thought with his promo? Decentralization, is that those tactical supervisor positions decentralize the fireground. And what I mean by that is in the traditional fire command structure, where, basically everybody's talking to the incident commander, it's very much a mother may I system, right? Everybody's waiting in line to call this guy on the radio and tell him this or ask him to do that. And when you got all these people trying to talk to one person, it just slows everything down, right? And that person is also not in the area that you're in. They can't see what you are seeing, right? And the other thing that you happen is you got, probably 2 to 4 companies, maybe on a fire floor, depending on what's going on, 2 to 4 companies. And without tactical supervisors, they're all kind of just operating independently. You're over here doing this and you're over here doing that, but you're not really communicating or coordinating. And it might make progress, but I would argue it doesn't make the best possible progress. When you put that tactical supervisor and you say, yo, Frank, you're in charge of the second floor. Here's engine 1, engine 2, and ladder 1. Do your thing. Frank now has the authority to do what he thinks needs to be done on the second floor. It decentralizes it. He doesn't have to mother may I to command. He can rapidly adapt his action. And my experience is that rapid adaptation is what moves the incident forward. And the other thing he can do is, Floyd, you made a good point, is I think, a bad rumor out there is that the division supervisor or tactical supervisor is supposed to go in there and take the captain's job. My job is not to tell firefighters what to do. My job is to coordinate captains. My job is to, hey, engine 1, y'all take your line back there. Ladder 1, how you doing on the search, right? Hey, we need to get in this ceiling up here, like tactical level kind of things, and
that becomes even more important then when we start working into manpower rotations, right? And we've got site companies cycling in and out. Now we've got a person that's right there. And I want to add one more thing too. Many of our firegrounds, right, we're all worried about that Mayday event, right? We all want to be prepared for that Mayday. By having division officers and having those divisions set up, you are in the best position with somebody close, directly in the area of where the Mayday is going to occur. Instead of developing out a rescue group or something, you have a division supervisor right there to address the Mayday and begin to give command direction on what needs done. That's right.
100%.
You are most responsive to any small change in a fireground.
100%. And I have been on Maydays as the division supervisor, and I manage the Mayday area. And I have been on Maydays as the incident commander, and I assigned the division supervisor to manage the Mayday area. I mean, my experiences, I can't hang my hat on it enough. What you got, Frank?
So I got 2 more things, man, while we're talking about all these benefits, right? And I think Floyd started going down this road, right, where you have companies operating up here, they're working hard, and they're going to have to be rotated out. So it not only like what Floyd said, where you're aware with the plan, what's transpired thus far, for when the relief crews get up there, you can kind of, just continue, making progress, keep the momentum. But what it also does from an incident commander perspective is it keeps that division supervisor from being a revolving door of people, right? So if you're assigning a company level officer as a division supervisor and they're up there working with their guys, well, they're probably going to come out at the same time their guys do as well, because they're expending air at a similar rate. Whereas if you put a chief officer in a forward position as a division supervisor and they're just kind of hanging back like, hey guys, let's get this ceiling open up, how's the search going, they're just kind of posted up out there, they can go through several rotations of people without having to be replaced. And from an incident commander perspective, that's less tracking that needs to occur. The other benefit of the assigning the division supervisor, and this is regardless of who it is when it comes time to do your par checks, right? So instead of, running a par, where you have to pull every single unit on a fireground like you're taking attendance, you can give that like preparatory command, like, hey, command units on a fireground, stand by for a par check. That keys the division supervisor in that you're getting ready to ask him is your division par, right? And you are not only speaking on behalf of yourself or your company, but all the companies that you're responsible for. So that would sound something like this. Commanded Division 2, par. And, they'll say, yeah, I'm par with engine 1, engine 2, and truck 1. All right, command to Division 3, par. Yeah, I'm par with myself and truck 3. and you just knocked out a par check in under 30 seconds, right? And the big key to that is giving that preparatory command, hey, units on Fireground, stand by for a par check, let it go 30 seconds to a minute. But when the division supervisor hears that, that tells them like, hey, I need to do a quick head count because they're getting ready to ask me this, and I need to have an answer for them. And it's nice and smooth. And like I said, your par check's complete in under 30 seconds. Again, keeping the radio open for more pertinent Fireground traffic.
I think that's a huge thing. And piggybacking on something you said there about, rotating the companies. One thing I've seen with that, when you're assigning a company officer to manage that division and they come out with their company for rehab and stuff like that, what that tends to lead to is when the next group of people comes in there, instead of picking up where the other company left off, a lot of times they spend too much of their time redoing what the other company already did, researching an area that was already researched, or checking for extension in an area that was already cleared or whatever, because they don't know what the previous company really did. Because they, you know what I mean? When you have a division or tactical supervisor that can be in there consistently for 2 or 3 company rotations, which is common for me, that I can handle like 2 or 3 company rotations. I've been there the whole time. So when one company comes out and the next company comes in, I can kind of help them pick up where the other company left off and move the incident forward rather than redoing things that were already done. But not to go back to the command post thing, but an interesting observation I kind of wrote down here earlier was that sometimes, a lot of what I see when I see people that are outside of the car running command is I see them acting like a tactical supervisor. It's just they're not really doing that job. Like they're not
Right.
really controlling the companies like that, or they're not in gear in an air pack, or maybe they are, or whatever. But a lot of what the out of the car guys do is what you would see a lot of our tactical supervisors do. I guess the difference for us is that, while I'm in that forward position, managing all the things we've been talking about, that there's also somebody back at a isolated command post that's distraction free, that is in a better position to track, where everybody is, what the assignments are, what benchmarks have been completed, and think about what we need to do next from a strategic level. But so, I guess we kind of talk about, I was kind of just looking at our notes here. I know some of the things we wanted to talk about there. Floyd, any other kind of thoughts on that tactical supervisor kind of position, or?
I agree 100%. I fully believe in that. If I was going to make I would say in addition to our incident management policies, if I was going to rewrite that today, that was in my authority, I would say that division position, its workflow, its responsibility would be clearly defined. That would be something we would embrace. And I think, the other side of it too is, and some people would argue, is what we put a lot of emphasis on the incident commander, their responsibility. We put a lot of responsibility or emphasis on those division supervisors. And the one piece that we didn't add in that command post environment that we haven't talked about yet is the chief's aide. And I don't know if we want to go down that rabbit hole this evening, but that's the third piece that we really need to build into an incident command system, is someone that assists the incident commander with other duties.
Yeah. And for us, that's our third arriving chief. Frank, I think it's your second, or you guys kind of have the discretion for the second arriving chief to be either, right?
Yeah, so it's written in a policy, depending on the complexity of the incident commander has the latitude to determine where that second chief is placed.
Do you guys have anything, either Frank or Floyd, do you guys have anything in writing or anything that you guys use to kind of, what you expect that command aide to do?
So we don't have anything formalized just yet. There is something in the works. I know a lot of the battalion buggies, like amongst the chiefs, we kind of put our heads together or whatever. So in the visor on the passenger side, there is like a checklist of things. But ultimately, monitoring a second channel. We're doing this thing now where we have a working incident that has any kind of magnitude to it. We're standing up a command channel, which is a lot of the interaction between the command post and communications, or the command post and staging, EMS, water supply, whatever the case may be, right? So if you're going to be running multiple channels, you need to have a second person in the buggy. And then the other benefit of that person is when you have these people that want to come up to the window and talk to you about this or that. Like if you don't got time for them, you can kind of point them over to the passenger side, and that person can run interference for you.
Yeah, I ran and grabbed one because they had one down here in the studio. But we talk a lot about how that command aide's primary job is really kind of running interference, for the incident commander. Or a lot of times I talk about, instead of I start the command aide conversation by talking about, well, what's the incident commander's job? And the only thing I want the incident commander to do during the fire is look at the building, talk on the Fireground radio channel, and track the companies. And yes, I want the incident commander, not somebody else, to track the location of companies. And we talk about how and why to do that a lot in the class, and we'll be talking about that on this webinar on the 23rd. But so that goes to that if that's the incident commander's job, well, everything else is the command aide's job. But we do have, on our command boards, we have these flip books that have different tactical guides on them. Our command aid, structure fire, mayday, stuff like that. And so one of them is the command aid guide, and that has a list, and you can see there's kind of a full page of things of what we want our incident commander, the aide, to be doing. And there's some stuff on there that we want them to be doing when they get in the car, like getting up to speed, making sure the right resource level or alarm level has been requested, some kind of check marks to help make sure the incident commander hasn't missed anything. There's some stuff on there about if we're going to a greater alarm, a third alarm or greater, the command aide is going to have some role with that, with managing initially a staging area until that gets set up and all that kind of stuff. For us, some off-duty callback, things like that. And one of the big things they're helping manage is our 15-minute situation assessments, and we kind of have a grid down here that helps with that. But one of the things we do at every 15 minutes is that PAR check that Frank was kind of alluding to there. But in addition to the PAR check makes sure, in short, that everybody's still alive, and also that those companies are still where you thought they were, that they're still operating in the tactical area that you had them assigned. You're kind of verifying the incident structure. But other things we're looking at that 15-minute interval are also, is the building still stable? Are conditions improving? Do we have enough resources? Do our actions match the conditions? And it's kind of a gut check, right? Like every 15 minutes. And if you've been through, our command program, you'll know that basically what I just talked about were the main criteria in determining whether we should be in the offensive or the defensive mode. And so by looking at building stability, conditions, resources, that kind of stuff, it's kind of a check, like, are we making progress, in the incident, or are we losing ground or spinning wheels? So, that's just, there's some other stuff on here too, but that's just kind of some of the stuff that our command aide is handling. Are your guys doing anything different or anything more than that, or?
So I thought of something else that we're kind of pushing is before that second chief even gets in the buggy with you, they're conducting a 360, and a lot of them are utilizing the the technology to their advantage, where they're snapping pictures of both sides of the structure or taking like little videos, right? So going back to what we talked about earlier, if that communication component is lacking or missing altogether, listen, Engine 2's telling me something, I don't know what they're trying to tell me, and then they can show you a video, and I'm like, oh, okay, now I get it. So just kind of using the different tools that are at your disposal to kind of put it all together.
I love that one. And I know, Frank, you've probably said that on like 4 podcasts for the past year. And I have still got to figure out how I got to remember to get that in my habit or in my policy or something, because that if you're at a stationary command post at all, whether it's outside of the vehicle or inside of the vehicle, like, it is tough. Like, you're wondering, what does the rear look like back? What are they talking about there? And like, that idea that somebody can go around there and take that quick video. I mean, the phones are stupid good these days, even at night. And either bring that to the command post, or in some cases, I mean, if your service is good, I guess maybe even text it to the command post. And now they just get that idea.
FaceTime me, bro.
Huh?
FaceTime me, bro.
Yeah, yeah, that's a hit them on FaceTime, exactly, right? I mean, tell me, they already got tethered drones and like, whatever other kinds of things. So, I mean, we're not all that far away from that, but
And
um,
the irony of all of this is I'm the least technological one of the entire group, and I'm the one
yeah,
that came up with that.
So if Chief Malta can do it, then all can.
Everybody can.
yeah, right, exactly. But the command post there, all they're getting from you is like video, like they're getting selfie videos and like fumbling with the screen and like, probably a lot of cussing and stuff. So, yeah, so. All right. Well, we've gone through kind of a bunch of good things here tonight. I mean, I think just, we got into some things we usually get into, but hopefully we got a little deeper with some of the tips and tricks. If you like what we're talking about tonight, you definitely want to be there on January 23rd. We're going to go in this webinar. It's going to be a lot. It's a class. It's not it's going to be a lot less conversational and a lot more kind of instructional. We're going to kind of go through these incidents, talk about how to use that command board, how we're going to structure that incident, how we're going to assign our companies, all that kind of stuff. So again, that's going to be up in the Bay floor, 7 p.m. on January 23rd. If you're not already a member, make sure you're signed up. We appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. Hopefully you got some good stuff out of it. Make sure you share this with anybody you think can get some value out of it. We'll have it up on Spotify and Apple Podcast here within the next couple days. But as we kind of wrap up, Frank, Floyd, you guys got anything to close out our night?
Yeah, so I mean, if everybody has their opinions on everything, right? And some people are set in their ways, but if you're not an in the car person, I certainly recommend you try it. I wouldn't advocate that you do it on your next fire without practicing it, beforehand. But just give it a shot. I don't need to smell smoke to know the house is on fire. I don't need to stand outside the buggy to know that it's 100 degrees because it's August. Like the things that people allege are the benefits of standing outside. I think they're kind of already known. You're just reaffirming them for whatever reason. So just give it a shot.
Yeah. Floyd?
I'm kind of a shout out to some of the departments around my region here. Some forward-thinking chiefs. They collectively work together, and they've written a pretty decent incident command policy that they're following in the suburban area. And with the policy they've implemented, you can tell a marketable difference in the organization, the tempo, and the communication on their firegrounds. So it's an example of multiple agencies working together and basically saying this is how we're going to do business. And I give those guys props because they've integrated a lot of what we've talked about. As a matter of fact, we did some of their fundamental training when they kind of implemented this. And from what I hear, from what I've witnessed, it has been effective. It's been successful. And so I give those organizations props for taking command seriously, organizing it, and then moving forward with that change.
Yeah, there's nothing more rewarding than seeing an organization improve, and if you can have a hand in that, I don't think there's any greater mark you can make in your career, than making the job better than you found it. So great way to close it out, Floyd. Appreciate you guys being on here tonight. Thanks to everybody tuning in. Join us on the 23rd. Check out thebayfloor.com. And until next time, stay combat ready.